Okay, let's just jump right into this explainer. Today we're exploring what is arguably one of the most terrifying, visceral body horror tragedies in modern animation. We're talking about Matt Hagen, better known as Clayface. But, we're not just doing a standard villain origin recap here. While other rogues are out there chasing money or revenge, Hagen's story is entirely different. We're examining a man whose desperate pursuit of an aesthetic ideal led to the absolute erasure of his true self. This is a deep psychological dive into identity, obsession, and what actually happens when the mask you wear becomes the only thing left of you. Right off the bat, we have to ask ourselves, what really happens when chasing an aesthetic ideal completely erases the person underneath? I mean, think of Hagen's story not as your run-of-the-mill crime thriller, but as a literal mythological curse. He's kind of like a modern Icarus, right? But instead of flying too close to the sun, he is actively drowning in the very substance of his own vanity. So, let's unpack exactly how this all went down. Since Matt Hagen's entire existence was so deeply bound to the stage and the screen, it's only fitting that his story unfolds like a classic theatrical tragedy. So let's look at how it all starts with pure, unadulterated vanity. Now, if you're familiar with the source material, you know the chemical Renew You isn't just some convenient plot device to give a guy superpowers. No, it's a literal poisoned chalice. It functions as both a physical mask and this incredibly dark metaphorical symbol. Hagen, who was a disfigured actor, becomes hopelessly addicted to this stuff just to maintain the handsome, flawless face his career demands. And Roland Daggett, this totally ruthless corporate executive, hands him this poison, completely aware of how he's exploiting him. It's this brilliant symbol of how massive corporate interests will absolutely prey on our personal vanity. And this creates a truly horrifying paradox for Hagen. On one side, you have this illusion of absolute aesthetic perfection that the entertainment industry demands. But on the other side, you have the scarred, imperfect reality of Matt Hagen's actual face. His self-worth was so inextricably tied to those impossible industry standards that he was willing to commit literal crimes for Daggett just to get his fix of Renew You. He completely sacrificed his moral integrity to maintain a hollow visual illusion. So the crucial takeaway here is that his big transformation wasn't just some tragic workplace accident. When Daggett's henchmen forcibly feed Hagen that chemical, the resulting overdose is actually a physical manifestation of his internal desperation. He turns into a literal mass of malleable, faceless clay. It is just striking visual symbolism. We are watching a man drowning in the sludge of his own vanity, which really proves he's less of a mastermind criminal and much more a victim of a corporate machine that exploited his desperation to just hollow him out entirely. Which brings us to the second phase of his tragedy, where things really start to break down. We move from a superficial loss of a face to straight-up visceral body horror. We're witnessing his ontological dissolution, which is essentially the complete breaking down of his very state of being. If we trace this horrific timeline across his entire story arc, you can really see a grim inevitability to it all. His metamorphoses basically act as this parasitic curse. In Feet of Clay, we get the initial overdose. But then, as we move into Mudslide, we start seeing massive physical instability. The guy is literally melting away. By the time we hit Growing Pains, that physical instability has mirrored a deeply fractured psychological state. And finally, by the Justice League era, it's just total dissolution. With every passing season, the core of who Matt Hagen was dissolves just a little bit more. You can really map out his tragedy in these distinct, horrifying stages. Early on, his primary struggle is literally just keeping a face together. He's completely addicted to an illusion. Then, in the middle stage, that struggle shifts. Now he's trying to maintain a conscience amidst total mental fragmentation. And in the late stage, complete dissolution, the total loss of his soul. And honestly, it's an incredibly dark irony. Because of his powers, Matt Hagen can now look like absolutely anyone in the world except his true self. He can literally never look like himself again. And this leads right into a deeply tragic moment involving Dr. Stella Bates. Dr. Bates actually showed Hagen genuine care, right? She tried to help him find stability as his body started losing cohesion. But Hagen totally rejects it. He just cannot accept life as what he views as a monster or a shadow of his former self. His eventual fall into the ocean, where he appears to dissolve, is heavily symbolic. He's destined to be washed away by the fluid nature of his new existence. It drives home a terrifying point. Once you sacrifice your original identity for a false one, you can never, ever truly reclaim it. So now we enter the climax of our theatrical tragedy, This is where we move past the melting physical flesh and pierce straight into the absolute moral vacuum of Matt Hagen's soul. By this point, Hagen's shapeshifting isn't a gift. It's practically a parasitic psychological state. To cope with it, he literally sheds a piece of his own mass to create a sentient being named Annie. Creating Annie was his ultimate psychological defense mechanism. He effectively externalized the very last pure, innocent fragment of his humanity. Annie represents the part of Matt Hagen that is totally free from the bitter, toxic sludge of his crimes and his horrific transformation. I really want to pause here for a second. Think about this. What actually happens when survival costs you your soul? Because this is the ultimate pivotal dilemma for Hagen. The choice he makes next is, without a doubt, the most horrifying decision of his entire existence. The path he takes to becoming a true predator happens in these terrifyingly logical steps. First, like we said, he externalizes his humanity into Annie. She's out there living, experiencing life totally free of his baggage. But then, facing his own physical instability, Hagen makes a conscious, truly horrifying choice: predatory consumption. He actively chooses to reabsorb her just to stabilize his own physical form. At this point, he's no longer an actor playing a desperate part. He has become a predator, consciously consuming his own potential for redemption just to physically survive. And that right there is when a true monster is born. By choosing physical wholeness over moral existence, Hagen crosses a line that he can never come back from. This exact moral choice is the definitive turning point in his lore. He totally severs any remaining ties to his humanity. He essentially murders the last innocent part of himself. Which leads us to the haunting aftermath of that choice. This is the finale of Clayface's existence, what we could call his ontological tomb. In this final era, Hagen has completely surrendered to the fluid, formless nature of his existence. He ends up joining the secret society, but not as some mastermind with grand ambitions. He's basically just a weapon of pure utility at this point. He's stopped seeking a cure. He's definitely stopped dreaming of a return to the stage, and his ultimate demise, literally being destroyed by an explosion, is a perfectly fitting end. A character who is completely defined by instability is finally scattered so thin that there is literally no self remaining to pull those pieces back together. When you spend your life trying to be everyone else, you eventually become no one at all. I mean, just let the profound weight of that cautionary tale sink in. This whole explainer has been about the horrifying cost of artificial renewal. Hagen started out as a man who was just trying to fix a single face, and in the end, it cost him his entire identity. We're going to end on this final, pretty stark thought. While a mask can be a vital tool for a hero trying to protect others, for a man without a core identity, a man desperately seeking validation in the reflection of an audience, that mask becomes a tomb. What parts of ourselves do we erase when we try to fit a perfect mold? It's something I want you to deeply ponder as we close out today's explainer. Thanks so much for joining me, and keep questioning the masks you see out there in the world.